world is greatly being affected by climate change. Venice is sinking, superstorms are becoming more common, the ice caps are melting, and weather patterns are radically shifting. The list goes on and on. The problems will continue to get worse unless we take action to stop the harm that we are doing to the environment. We can afford to do this. Cut spending from defense, cut spending from other things. The Keystone Pipeline, which the Republicans are pushing for, guaranteed only 35 jobs. We're not going to hurt any jobs by trying to save the world. We need to push alternative energies because there will be a point when we can't use fossil fuels. We need to cut emissions and understand our effect on the environment will hurt not only America, but other countries and other species. Solutions need to be implemented and suggested by the government if anything is going to work. If the government will set the example for countries around the world, then we still have a chance to preserve the world as it is now. Earth in the form as it is now, biologically diverse and able to sustain this amount of life, may not last much longer if we continue to disregard our impact on the environment. The Earth is not a resource for humanity to exploit and destroy. Our actions are ruining our habitat and we must take responsibility.
Our next topic is Iran. Recently, President Obama and Congress failed to reach an agreement on a strategy for limiting Iran's nuclear capabilities. Does a nuclear Iran pose an existential threat to the United States and its allies? And will the executive agreement negotiated by the Obama administration curb Iran's nuclear ambitions?
My name is Grant Holtzbridge, and I will be discussing the Iran deal. This deal that's been said by many Republican candidates that they will tear this deal up the first day they're in office is a terrible deal. The first thing about it is all the financial sanctions. Iran wants all of these sanctions lifted very quickly, and the U.S. wants them very, very slowly lifted off them. Iran wants to have access, and is going to $150 billion, and that's based off their economy. It would be equal to $8 trillion US dollars. 77% of Americans right now believe the sanctions should be kept the same or increased. 60% of Americans disapprove of the United States' relations with Iran at all. The nuclear fuel stockpiles, uranium fuel is used to make bombs or energy. P5+1 wants Iran to ship the fuel to Russia or convert the fuel to a form used not in weapons. Obama has claimed that he has blocked all of Iran's paths to building nuclear weapons, but this mighty claim made by President Obama is false. Iran is still allowed to continue producing the ingredients used in nuclear warheads and bombs, and they are allowed to still be enriching uranium and producing plutonium. The centrifuges, the machines that produce uranium fuel, Iran has 19,000 of them right now. They want 200,000. The U.S. wants Iran to have only 6,500. There are nuclear bunkers where they keep these centrifuges. They currently have a facility located under a mountain that, in this case of suspicion, would be very hard to attack, and the U.S. wants it gone. It can be used to make uranium for bombs and the plutonium. With the inspections, America and the P5+1 included we need to be inspecting Iran, but they want to do it themselves. Obama says that it can be conducted anytime, anywhere, but they have up to 24 days notice before an inspection.
You have 3 minutes.
We're going to first start with a little history lesson. So, Nazir Dir al-Shah literally sold the country of Iran to Western powers in 1848 and essentially turned all the freight industry into corporate benefits for Britain and the United States. If anything, the sanction and the lifting of sanctions on Iran would be the last stance against neo-imperialism in the Middle East and essentially in that region of the world. But not only that, we also helped overthrow Mohammed and Mossadegh in 1954 to institute a strongman because apparently he didn't like communism, but then he abused thousands of people and we freaked out when they took 50 of ours for a year. Furthermore, in 1988, the USS Vienna killed 88 people because they shot down an Iranian airliner, and we saw the audacity to call them terrorists. The entire Republican ideology towards Iran is predicated off of an idea that they are inherently terrorists. But let's look at the facts. First, they say that Iran would lose or gain this massive amount of money, but guess what? Since we implemented sanctions on Iran, they not only haven't worked, but their currency has been devaluated 60%. Sanctions have never worked. Look at Somalia, look at Russia. There's never been a single instance in which sanctions worked. Furthermore, so what if they get $8 trillion? Yeah, they can put it back into recreating their infrastructure. They're not clerical radicals. And furthermore, 60% of all Americans also think that God can save for climate change. So should we really prefer a poll about 60% of Americans? And they talk about this bomb idea. All of this is answered by the IAEA in the plan that was signed in Belgium. If they read the plan that was legitimately passed, then all of their answers would dissolve. They say that Iran has 24 hours to prepare. I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to move 15,000 nuclear fuselages to hide from the UN. Furthermore, we limit the amount of fuselages that Iran can have. They never talk once about the number. All they say is that they have the ingredients to make a nuclear bomb. But a majority of countries in the world have the ingredients to make a nuclear bomb. The amount of fuselages and the amount of plutonium needed to enrich and create a nuclear bomb is substantially more than the amount that they are given. If anything, they can put their resources towards creating renewable energy, to fostering their economy, and legitimately being a productive part of that region. Furthermore, a majority of their fears are predicated off of Middle East instability and spillover impacts. The only reason their authors that they read are friendly towards the Iran deal is because they just don't want Israel to get nuked, because they have to side with Israel, because they're friendly to the administration right now in Israel. There's no legitimate reason why you should oppose the Iran deal or any implications or impacts of the Iran deal. Thank you.
You have 1 minute.
Now, what I didn't get to talk about is terrorism. They recently have bought tons of these ingredients from Russia and China lately, and they're getting billions to fund this terrorism that they're doing. This deal lifts sanctions on General Soleimani, Iran's shadow commander. He's responsible for the deaths of hundreds of U.S. troops. And this guided Hezbollah raids on Israel and the training of Assad's forces in Syria. Don't tell me we can trust someone and that someone is Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, who in recent weeks proclaimed to his people, quote unquote, our policies will not change vis-a-vis the arrogant government of the United States. At all. Death to America, death to Great Britain, death to Israel, and death to the hypocrites.
Continuing with our foreign policy theme, the next question is about ISIS and is for the Young Democratic Socialists. Since the George W. Bush administration, the U.S. has been fighting a war on terror in both Central Asia and the Middle East. As ISIS becomes a regional threat, what should determine U.S. foreign policies in those regions, and what role should the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center continue to play in the war on terror?
Okay, the Guantanamo Bay Naval Center should play no role in the war on terror. Guantanamo Bay was used after 9/11 as a place to house and interrogate suspected terrorists, but the people there were subjected to the torture techniques utilized by the CIA. That's like rectal feeding, sleep deprivation, use of insects, mock executions, and threats to kill and sexually assault their families. These suspected terrorists have endured psychological, physical, and medical abuse. This is especially frightening when you know that at one point in 2013, only 6 out of the 166 prisoners there had been convicted of anything. And it's even worse that it's all useless. Research shows that torture doesn't even get results of reliable information. Gitmo hasn't allowed us to stop terrorism and just lengthened the list of our own human rights abuses. We have to do something about all the people who are still being illegally held in Gitmo. First, we actually have to give them a fair trial. Then, those who have actually been convicted may be transferred to other maximum security prisons. To allow Gitmo to stay open is to perpetuate the dehumanization that happens there and to allow the hypocrisy of the United States to gain even more foreign opposition.
The United States can't march into Syria and tell the government not to starve their people when we're depriving our own prisoners of humane treatment. Our hypocrisy doesn't go unnoticed, and we're seeing the real effects, such as our expulsion from the UN Human Rights Commission. We see the negative effects of GMO when we have to deal with things such as ISIS, who some think is the biggest problem for terrorism. But a count by New America, a Washington Research Center, shows that terrorist attacks are more than twice as likely to come from non-Muslim extremists than by radical Muslims. Military approaches against ISIS have not been successful. We have armed Syrian rebels, that didn't work. We sent more armed forces, that didn't work. We threw money at them, that didn't work. Maybe we should try something different. Let's work diplomatically with other countries to resolve problems. For example, we could work with the UN, and it'd be a lot easier to work with the UN if they didn't have us on the list of human rights abusers. Look at what's going on. People are dying and people are being tortured on both sides. We worry about a group thousands of miles away when it's more likely to come from home. Terrorism is an issue. And we should address it, but we need to address where it's coming from and deal with it in a way that doesn't just cause more deaths.
Hello. First off, ISIS is a growing national security threat, and they have attacked us on our own turf. The Islamic State has 200,000 members and is growing every day. The Obama administration's plan against the Islamic State is currently not doing what they have predicted it to do. It has not slowed down the growth of the Islamic State or weakened them. Russia has just signed an agreement with Iraq, Iran, and Syria that includes intel sharing. The U.S. should have been included in this deal. We should have demanded to help fight ISIS because we are all fighting the same goal, or we are all fighting for the same goal. And if Iran wants to gain our trust with a nuclear program, they need to show that they can be trusted as an ally on the battlefield. My policy and plan for the Middle East. The failed foreign policy of the Obama administration has led to recent developments that have came to fruition this week. Russia has now moved into Syria to help protect the Assad regime and to help eradicate ISIS in the region. Under a president with great negotiating power, the U.S. needs to form an agreement or alliance with Russia for a set amount of time to conduct joint military operations in the region. This deal should not only include Russia, but other allies of the U.S. in the Middle East. Egypt, Israel, and Lebanon could also be included in this plan. Throughout these regions where the Islamic State, the UN sets up military bases throughout the Middle East where the Islamic State has once controlled. The world superpowers need to take steps forward and lead the fight for a common good in the Middle East. And I think this is the best way to accomplish this goal. This needs to be a world goal, not just a U.S. goal. Radical Islamic terrorism is a problem in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and North America. World powers need to fight for one common goal and for one common good. And first off, do you remember the raid that got Osama bin Laden? That was because of GitLab. That was because of our tactics. That was because that is how we get information to find out where these terrorists are hiding and hunt them out. Thank you.
Guantanamo Bay and the War on Terror are an abomination to America's international credibility. The greatest achievement of the War on Terror has been the destabilization of the Middle East and the discrimination of Middle Easterners. Our fight against the Islamic extremists we call terrorists has resulted in more radicals, more terrorism, and more fear. The disaster we call Guantanamo Bay must be shut down, and we must reevaluate the way we handle our prisoners. Imprisoning and torturing innocent people has not and will not fix anyone's problems. Obama built the Middle East. Let's talk about what Bush did to the Middle East. The problems we see now are a direct result of the U.S. involvement. The problems we have created won't just go away, but our continual violent strategy will just make the problems worse. We need to work alongside other countries and focus on diplomatic strategies to fix any terrorism problems. The War on Terror has marginalized a group in society. It has created racism and discrimination against Middle Easterners and Muslims. These groups have become another scapegoat for America's problems, just as the Native Americans, African Americans, and countless other ethnic minorities before them. We can't let this continue.
Our next topic is gun control. Recently, Americans have witnessed a surge in gun violence. Various states have attempted to enact stronger gun control policies whereas the federal government has been slower to respond. What role, if any, should the federal government play in regulating firearms?
First off, I'd like to say the only people who follow the law are law-abiding people. Criminals, by definition, ignore the law. You can pass all the gun control laws in the world that the socialist or left wants, but you have to realize criminals are going to ignore the law because that's what they do. The left is in favor of restricting guns and taking guns away from law-abiding citizens because of heinous acts of few. In 2012, Chicago banned all firearms in the city and shut down every gun store in the city. Chicago had more gun-related deaths than coalition forces killed in Afghanistan that year. Look at DC too. They have very strict gun laws, but are still in top tier of gun murders in the U.S. Gun control and leftist ideology is not what is going to help fix this problem we have. In the mass shooting of Newtown, Adam Lanza stole those weapons from his mother's house. There will always be a way to get guns. There will always be a way to get drugs. No matter how many things you ban, no matter how many restrictions you push through, bad people will always find a way to do bad things, and law-abiding citizens will be left defenseless. We don't need more gun control. We need stricter gun punishments. In Florida, there's a law called the 1020 life law. If you pull that weapon during a crime, that mandatory punishment is 10 years. For firing that weapon during the crime is a mandatory 20 years. If you fire that weapon and injure or kill someone during that crime, it is a mandatory 25 years to life sentence. I think this should be adopted as a federal law for all 50 states. Thank you.
That's the number of mass shootings that have happened in America since the start of 2015. That's an average of more than one a day. The United States holds 5% of the world's population, but has 31% of the world's mass shootings. There are more mass shootings in the stable United States than there are in countries experiencing serious unrest. There are 3 million guns for 318 million Americans. These guns are bought for recreation and protection uses, but every time a gun injures or kills in self-defense, one is used 11 times for completed or attempted suicide, 7 times in criminal assault or homicide, and 4 times in an unintentional shooting. These guns that are supposed to be protecting our own citizens are killing innocent people. Every day, more than 30 people are shot and killed. This morning, a 16-year-old girl was shot in Shawnee, Kansas. On September 27th, 4 people in the Jazz District were shot. A man was shot and killed on September 25th. In the past week, 6 people have been injured by gun violence in the metro area alone. These stories aren't big news because they happen so often. Gun violence isn't just hurting the victims, it's hurting America as a country. Medical costs, costs of the criminal justice system, security precautions such as metal detectors, and reductions in the quality of life all happen because of the fear of gun violence. U.S. lifetime medical costs for gunshot injuries total an estimated of $2.3 billion, and U.S. taxpayers pay for almost half of that. The gun laws we have now are inadequate and failing. In 1 year, at least 30,000 guns were lost out of gun dealers' inventories, and no background check sales account for an estimated 40% of gun sales in the United States. Francisco Sanchez wouldn't have been able to shoot and kill innocent Americans if it was harder for him to have access to weapons. Gun control should not be a question of if we do it, but how we do it. The right to bear arms that's outlined in the Second Amendment is cherished among many Americans. They appreciate the idea that they have the power to protect and arm themselves. These rights and privileges can be protected while making America safer for the average citizen. The government should enforce the laws they've already created. Gun purchasers should go through a thorough background check, comply with certain standards, and have access to only certain types of guns. Gun carriers should be held to a standard of responsibility. They should go through training so they can properly handle the weapon in their hands. The power to take human life is not something that should be handled lightly. Owning a gun doesn't make you safer. Statistics show that as more people own guns, gun violence goes up. Countries with stricter gun control laws and therefore fewer guns have drastically lower violence rates. Self-protection doesn't need to come with a high cost of innocent lives. Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, Fort Hood, Binghamton, Columbine, Washington Navy Yard, Emmanuel Methodist Episcopal Church, Red Lake, Jacksonville, Aurora, all of these tragedies are a result of gun violence and could have been stopped. The conservative ideology is that having a large number of guns in the population is the way to promote peace, but the facts don't add up. The right to life must come before the right to bear arms.
You have 1 minute.
In our great nation, it is our Second Amendment right to bear arms. The Founding Fathers gave us inalienable rights to protect against tyranny and enemies both domestic and abroad. To strip the American people of this right would be a grave mistake. And Francisco Sanchez, the illegal immigrant who killed Kate Steinle in San Francisco, stole that gun out of a federal agent's car. It would be a great mistake. In the words of an infamous socialist, Adolf Hitler, to conquer a nation, first disarm its citizens. If you want gun control, use two hands.
Our last topic is education. A number of Americans have grown alarmed at the increasing cost of higher education. President Obama has recently advocated for free community college for those willing to maintain acceptable academic standards. Is this the right approach to provide Americans the crucial educational skills needed to thrive in the 21st century? For the young Democratic Socialists.
The class of 2015 will graduate with $35,051 in student debt, on average, according to an analysis from Mark Kantrowitz. The issue of student debt and the issue of the way we structure education in the United States isn't just a problem for us, it's a problem for our kids, the generation that's going to follow, and it needs to be an issue that's addressed right away, right now. Obama, earlier this year, laid out a plan to address community college, saying that if you wanted a free or slightly reduced pay for community college and were willing to work for it, willing to maintain a GPA, you can legitimately do it, but why stop there? The issue of student debt isn't one that just came out of thin air. It isn't one just like manufactured by some educational industrial complex. It is an externality of the demand and the supply of college right now, but it's also issues of the ways we subsidize education in the United States, the way we address student loans, and the way the colleges have set up the system. But it shouldn't just stop there. Education should be something that's guaranteed. It allows us to innovate and start from the bottom up to make America great, so we're not sitting right behind like Estonia and all the other countries that are halfway down the list. We also need to start at a lower level, guaranteeing K-level education, lower levels education, changing how we address students in the classroom, changing the pedagogy we use to address teaching, and how we integrate kids into high school. There's a reason why it's called the high school to prison pipeline. Because the institutions we use to educate, the institutions we've established for education, are synonymous to the institutions we use to condemn, to trap people, and to imprison people. There is nothing humane about how we teach. There is nothing reasonable about how we teach. Every other country does it, and there's a laundry list of empirical analysis on how to do it. So we can start with Finland, or we can start with any Western European country, but just not the way we're doing it right now.
First off, I'd like to say higher education is a privilege. It's not a right, and it's not guaranteed to you by anyone. Republicans believe in restructuring of higher education, which would leave more students equipped with the desired fields and less working minimum wage jobs that are irrelevant to their education. Next, they believe in limiting the federal government in education. This includes getting rid of all federal student loans and having only private loans. Republicans also support school choice and homeschooling programs. Overall, Republicans believe strongly in an educational system that will provide higher education to those whose achievements deserve it. And that will give students the environment they want and to be successful both now and when they pursue their education farther. Obama's plan will cost the U.S. $60 billion in just a short 10 years. Where is this money coming from? They're going to take it out of private educational funds from the wealthy 1%. Only 3% of the community college population fits the criteria of this plan that Obama proposes. It's a 2.5 GPA and a family income that is less than $200,000 yearly. So we are going to spend $60 billion to send 3% of the community college population to school for free. Thomas W. Miller Jr. of World Report U.S. News posted a story. He said he went over to France where they have free education, and none of the students paid attention. They were all on their phones. They didn't really care. They were just hanging out. They didn't respect him at all because the education was free in France. And he compared it to when you have equity in the stock market, you care what it does because you are worried about it. You have your money on the line. It's the same when you have students that are paying for college. Their life is on the line. If they don't have good grades, they don't do well, they're not going to be able to pay back this debt. Or if you have the fear of having your scholarship taken away, you work better under pressure. And I don't think that giving free education is how you get good results. I think that you have people that will take it for granted. And lastly, I would like to quote the teacher and leader of the Young Democratic Socialists, Tony Bedetti. More people have graduated from college this year, or the past year, than ever before in America. So if it's not broke, don't fix it.
You have 1 minute.
First, I want to ask you, what defines whether a person deserves an education? Do you actually know that? Because what if there's a young girl in Cincinnati that her only goal for the day is go to school and learn? What if she has something in her head that could advance our society greatly, but she's not given the opportunity to extract it? By the way, there are GPA requirements for these programs.
2.5. Said it.
Yeah, there are. So you can't fail. You said they were going to fail. You can't fail if there's a GPA requirement in order to have a free education. People have a right to an education. No one deserves to be able to tell someone else that they can't do something they want to do. I don't understand how in your mind you think you are better than everybody else because they don't have the money to provide for their future. If you don't have the money to go to college, how are you supposed to get a job to make money in the future? You guys are complaining about the immigration and the taxes and all of this, but if people had a right to an education, that wouldn't be a problem.
We are now ready for concluding remarks. The Young Republicans will be going first. They have 3 minutes, followed by the Young Democratic Socialists.
In the next 13 months, you have an important choice to make which will change our great nation forever. We could research back towards the deep roots of conservatism which has brought our country prosperity for over 200 years. Or we could lose sight of what made us great and spiral into the failed policies of socialism. What you can do is help us make South great again, make our community great again, make Kansas great again, and ultimately make America great again. Thank you, and God bless America.
Donald Trump says he wants to make America great again. But I asked him, and I asked the young Republicans, when has America ever been great? What great America are you referring to? Are you referring to when we were under British colonial rule and only acknowledged the desires of property-holding white men? Are you referring to when we burned women at the stake in Salem? When we refused to grant civil liberties to women and minorities? When we ignored the Holocaust? When we dropped 2 bombs on Japan? When thousands of men were sent to Vietnam and died for no reason or cause? A 12-year Iraq war that's responsible for deaths of hundreds and thousands of innocent civilians? Or maybe they're referring to the 1.1 million brave American soldiers who sacrificed their lives fighting for our soil over the course of our history, not realizing that that's barely a fraction compared to the 60 million plus Africans who died in our history slave trade that built this country's economy where the benefits are still seen and exploited today, or the 80 to 100 million, roughly 90% of the Native American population that were eradicated and genocide for the expansion of this so-called great country. What kind of America do you foresee us returning to? You must delete that operative word again that dances on the millions of bones of minorities whose livelihoods were stolen from them, that laughs at the immigrants who were and are oppressed to a brink of inhumaneness, and ridicules an environment that we continue to devastate past the point of crisis. Tradition, something so popular with conservative political ideology, is not what this country needs. Tradition wrongly values itself in free and practice principles of freedom, diversity, and opportunity. Tradition is what has caused so much of our history shame. Tradition causes unnecessary wars and raids that leaves innocent people murdered. Tradition is what causes oppression within our own domestic state and devalues human lives. The lives of the queer, the Black, the Hispanic and Latino, the natives, the disabled, and the poor. Tradition causes foreign oppression and assigns unfair stereotypes. Tradition is not what this united country needs. We need liberty, we need equality, we need change, we need progress. We can't make this country great again, but we can make it great. We make it great through fighting for equality among all races, socioeconomic classes, gender, sexualities, disabilities, and psychological conditions, having the power of the 1% and the elite, providing healthcare, education, fair wages, and benefits indiscriminately among all members of our nation. All those ideas are the embodiment of democratic socialism. They are not radical, they are not impossible, they are modeled from countries who've already successfully implemented them. They are a glimpse into a future of equality, and they are a glimpse into a future of a great America.
That concludes our debate today. We hope it was both educational and entertaining. Would those of you please stand to be recognized? Now you have these guys.
We also want to thank Mr. Hirons. Let's give a big round of applause. Great job. We hope everybody had a good time today.